All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am Nick. I am here with Matt Law for a Matt Law special on this fine Tuesday. You're listening to this on a Wednesday. Matt Law, how are we doing?
I was going to rename my name on the screen Nostradamus today.
Yeah,
I'll let you explain why, but
yeah.
I think that's the name I need to go by for today.
It's gonna be a long old episode, isn't it? Okay, here we go. Look, I think just like before we dive into the whole, kind of top five race and everything, let's talk Liverpool because obviously the big win on Sunday, probably, I think for my money, one of our better performances, if not our best performance of the season. Talk about Liverpool being on the beach or whatever, but I think this was a really good performance. Definitely the best competition that we've beaten this year. How was this in the stadium? You did call that this could happen. Obviously Liverpool won the league last week. Maybe weren't at their absolute best, but still played a pretty decent lineup. It wasn't like they just played all their academy products.
I don't know.
It was a team with Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah in it. It wasn't.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
It wasn't
6 changes.
Weakest. Yeah. Okay.
One player in just to get a Premier League winners medal, which kind of gave you a slight idea of the mentality. Yeah. I've got to say, I saw the lineup and I was loving it because of my prediction, which you refused to accept, that Chelsea were going to win this game. And when I saw it, I fancied it even more. I've got to say, and that's not taking anything away from Chelsea. You still have to play the game properly. They started with a brilliant momentum, which obviously brought a very early goal. I think had they have not started with a momentum, you can see a team like Liverpool grow into it. And you also knew that the big players, I know Van Dijk and Salah and Alisson were playing, but the other big players who were on the bench, you knew they would probably come on around the hour mark. So again, you needed to be in a good place by the hour mark, result and also performance-wise, because if you weren't, if it was 0-0, if you're really struggling, I think then the Alamo comes on and it can be a very difficult half an hour. And while it got a little bit nervy at the end, I think you've got to give Chelsea credit despite Liverpool's lineup and slight attitude, because I thought first 10 minutes you could see they just weren't at it. And like I say, the fact they're playing a player simply to get a Premier League winners medal tells you a lot about where they were with that game.
How was it in the stadium? I mean, I think there notably is probably a lot of nerves right now. If you're a Chelsea fan, this is a big game. Chelsea haven't beat Liverpool in 10 straight games. I think you could understand if the atmosphere is a little weird. It seemed okay on TV from what I could hear.
No, it was good. It was good. I mean, it was obviously helped by a very early goal, because I think the first 20 minutes could have been anxious. But the Chelsea, I mean, look, the Liverpool fans were good. They were there for a party, so they made a noise, but it wasn't hostile noise. But the Chelsea fans were loud and they got behind the team, and they did that at the start before the goal was scored. And then the goal obviously really whipped it up. There was anxiety in the last 15 minutes or so when Chelsea retreated a little bit, and particularly when Liverpool scored. But that's to be expected. That's just the point of the season we're at. But full credit to the fans. I thought they were really good. I thought they were good with the players. They were good with the manager. I thought they created a good atmosphere. It was a good day all round.
Chelsea are now on a pretty decent run of results. I mean, a couple of draws in there that I'm sure they wish they had back, but overall, since the Tottenham game, looking pretty good in the league. Have you noticed anything in particular that might have changed since that Tottenham result that might have been the springboard for Chelsea to finish the season on a decent run here?
Well, look, I've got a couple of thoughts. My first thought that I would like to say is that I do think, for all the little niggles we've had about the manager this season, I don't think we've given him outright stick, but we've both had our little annoyances about him this season. The last 3 games, he's made some really big decisions, which have all, let's face it, come off in Chelsea's favour. The substitution at Fulham turned that game, and it was he had left Nkunku out as a brave sub to throw on Tyree, and it worked fantastically. Another big decision that's come off in the last couple of games is Noni on the left. Really helped the team. Not just helped Noni and provided a threat from the left, which wasn't there, but helped Pedro Neto, who is so much more comfortable on the right and seems to enjoy. He just the last couple of games, he's been really dangerous again and looked really on it. So fair play to Maresca on that. And then the other one, which people say is obvious, but getting Lavia in there and moving Caicedo to this inverted fullback, it's not easy to drop Reece James, because if that goes wrong, it's something that will get spoken about. He is the captain. Whatever you think of, well, it's obvious to play Caicedo and Lavia and Fernandes. It's still not an easy decision to make, to leave your captain on the bench, particularly a captain who's so popular and who is also so talented.
Yeah.
And he's done that, and it has paid off. That little system, he played it, earlier in the season when Lavia was fit as well, to great success when things were going a lot better. And that little trio of Caicedo as the inverted right back, Lavia allowing Fernandes to push on a little bit and not have to worry what's behind him, it really works. And the other thing that works about it is when you bring Lavia off and you shift Caicedo into midfield, it's like suddenly having a new injection in midfield, because obviously Caicedo just comes powering into midfield, and we saw him win the penalty. I think those three decisions have been really, really important for Chelsea. And I do think the manager deserves credit for that. And then my other point on maybe what's gone for Chelsea in the last few games is linked to that, is, Lavia coming back from injury, huge, absolutely massive. I think, probably I shouldn't, but I think I'd probably actually forgotten how good they'd been earlier in the season with Lavia in there, and how impactful he actually is to the team and the system and people around him. And I'd when Lavia came back at the end of the season, I kind of thought, oh, that's good. But I didn't really think, oh, wow, that's going to change Chelsea's season. And actually, I think he could be the man who just will have got them over the line in the end. I mean, I've always been confident they would get there, but I think Lavia has really, really given them something extra this last couple of games. And, touch wood, he stays fit. I think that's huge for them.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a player who, I think we did the calculation a couple weeks ago that he had only played 12% of his Chelsea games a couple weeks ago. So it's probably like closer to like 14, 15% now, something like that. It's a player that Chelsea have just simply not been able to rely on due to various injuries, right? And that's, I don't think it's anyone's fault. It's just the way that it, sometimes the cookie crumbles a little bit there. So, this is a player who, isn't full 90 fit yet. I don't know.
No, not at all. He can't play 90 minutes at the moment.
I think it's 60 minutes, and then maybe risk an extra 5 or 10 minutes on top of that, but it's not the full 90. You could kind of see in the second half, he was dropping off a little bit in terms of, that pace and intensity. But, I would argue, at least from what I've been seeing these last couple of matches, the pace of play and the intensity in midfield, winning the ball back, has caused other teams a lot of problems. And this is, Chelsea looking dangerous again because they're turning the ball over in midfield and advancing it a little bit more quickly than some of the more, I would call it, very turgid play that we saw from the December kind of through early April period that was maybe just not as snappy, not as quick. So is that kind of what you're seeing from Lavia, is just that extra body in there, winning the ball back, that sort of thing?
Well, look at that first goal against Liverpool. It was exactly that. Lavia takes it from deep, turns, was it Curtis Jones? I can't remember who he turned, but turned round someone a couple of times. I think there's been a lot of points at this season where that pass goes backwards or it goes sideways and it all slows down. No, boom into Palmer's feet. Palmer, obviously, head up straight towards goal. It was a really incisive move, and it came from Lavia playing like that from deep, and they haven't been playing like that from deep without him. It's all been slow, sideways, backwards, spread the play. And that can be effective, don't get me wrong, but it's a very different style. But that first goal against Liverpool, for me, really showed me and was a very good example of how it can be different with Lavia in there. And I did think Chelsea actually did play differently against Liverpool. They were a bit more direct. There were a fair few sort of longish balls from Sanchez. There wasn't a lot of knocking it round crazily at the back for ages. Whether that's because they were worried about Liverpool's press, or whether that's a concerted effort to play a bit differently, who knows? Or whether it's because Lavia's in there, I don't know. But I certainly preferred it, and I like it.
Yeah, me too. Because I think do you think it's an acknowledgement from Enzo Maresca that like we're in this final stretch, right? It's just kind of whatever gets the job done, and the stubborn ideology that led to a huge dip in form, alongside some really difficult player performances over the last kind of 3-4 months. Do you think it's him just going, we'll figure it out in the summer. We can increase the way that we play as we get through the Club World Cup and into the next season. But for us to be where we need to be, we might need to, cede possession. We might need to play a little bit more direct. We might need to not worry about Sanchez playing little dink passes around his area and maybe giving up a cheap goal that might keep us out of, the Champions League.
Yeah, it could be a bit of that. He doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. He's so stubborn. Yeah. It could be a bit of that. Certainly the Sanchez thing, I wonder whether there is a little bit of that. But I think Enzo would tell you, and he did say something like this after the game, that frankly, it's about having players available. And I certainly think in terms of how we saw them play against Liverpool is much closer to how they were playing back in December when Lavia was playing. And I think he would simply argue that's about players available, being able to have Caicedo as the inverted right back, who's basically playing as a midfielder, with Lavia there as well. And it gives them a greater impetus. It gives them greater sort of energy and directness almost. And you have Enzo further forward as well. So look, that's what I think he would say. But I wonder as well whether the players have taken it on a little bit themselves as well. You get up ahead of steam and you want to keep it going, and possibly with Sanchez and his balls out. I saw Enzo clap him a few times actually when he played a few long balls, which actually surprised me because obviously we had it earlier in the season when Enzo made that ridiculous comment saying he would drop him if he played a long ball. But he actually clapped him on a few long balls. So that may point to the fact that he's been told to do things slightly differently.
You mentioned the Neto and Madueke kind of switch, right? Where Madueke has been on the right all year, and for the last couple of matches has been on the left. I think he's been particularly effective on that left-hand side. Obviously, as a player who prefers his left foot, maybe not in the shooting positions that he's used to being on the right-hand side, but I think been hugely effective in terms of width and providing spacing for the rest of the team, directness and attack.
Directness, yeah.
I mean, it's been an impressive bit. Pedro Neto has also improved playing on the right, and I think both of these players, so raising their level and making opposition fullbacks care about them, has freed up Cole Palmer to maybe start to get the wheels turning a little bit in a way that we haven't seen as much in the second half of the season. Do you think all of this is connected in the way that Chelsea are playing? Is someone who watches this team week in, week out like we do, and maybe a little bit of like the collective raising a level and then Cole being able to kind of be special?
Yeah, I think it has to be. And I think Cole looks comfortable with those players around him. He looks comfortable. Look, I know he had a go at Nico a few times on Sunday. Nico didn't have a great game, but we know he likes playing when Nico's in the team. They have a good understanding, even though they get frustrated with each other. And we know that he's quite pally with Noni as well. You could see that after the game, and we already knew that. So I imagine he likes having Noni in the team, whether it be on the right or the left. So he just looks a little bit more comfortable. But I just think those front three, certainly out wide, Neto just looks so much better on the right than he does the left. And I just always like Madueke. He can be slightly infuriating, but I always like how direct he is. He's always willing to carry the ball forwards, always willing to take a player on, always willing to have a shot. Although, like you say, it's harder for him to do that off the left, but not impossible. And they've just adapted really well. And it's kind of one of those where you look at it and think, why didn't they try this earlier in the season? I mean, I didn't particularly think of it. I wasn't screaming for Noni to play on the left, but you kind of, given the problems they've had with the left side, particularly since Mudryk has been available, you kind of look at it and think, wow, how's it taken them this long to look at this? But it doesn't really matter because they've looked at it at just the right time. And in the last two matches, certainly against Liverpool and Everton, it's really looked quite promising for them on that. You know, they'd still like their wide men to be coming up with better numbers, but it's too late in the season to worry about that now. It's just about causing impact, causing chaos, and creating opportunities. And they certainly look comfortable together. And you're right, the fullbacks have to take an awful lot of notice of Madueke and Neto in those positions. And also, you know, whoever the sort of holding midfielders are, as it were, who always have to cover fullbacks when they've gone forwards, they have to take a lot more notice of them, which is going to create space elsewhere, and that creates space for Cole.
Well, and that's kind of, I think, what you're mostly seeing, and I think part of the reason why maybe Cole felt a little bit more free, not, you know, I don't think beginning of the season free, but like, you know, for a lot of the second half of the year, opposition have put a box around him. They put 3 or 4 players where he's operating in a very small area and is not able to easily break free or make some of those dynamic passes or shots that, you know, we've seen from him in the past. I mean, obviously the goal for him is huge. You could tell the relief that kind of came over him and a lot of his teammates. I thought the celebrations were fantastic. He obviously, in the post-game press conference, was not super pleased with the social media trolls and all the sort of stuff that had happened since the form kind of dipped a little bit. Is he in a position now? I mean, you've seen players come in and out of form over your career.
Yeah.
Is he in a position where this last few games of the season, he can kind of lift himself, not have to worry about, you know, the goalless streak and all that sort of stuff, and, like, you know, help Chelsea get over the line?
Yeah. I'd be amazed if it doesn't give him a momentum for the end of the season. I'd be quite surprised if he doesn't score a couple of goals before now and the end of the season as well. I think it's perfect timing. I know I'll go back to it. I know Nico had a bad game on Sunday, but his goals were very timely for him and Chelsea. And this is very timely for Cole and Chelsea. Look, I don't necessarily expect him just to hit, in terms of the goals, to hit the levels he was at. Just, you know, everything he felt at one stage, everything he was hitting was going in. And there was a real interesting moment in the first half against Liverpool when I thought he had a real Cole Palmer shooting opportunity, I think on his left foot just outside the box, and he literally turned it inside onto his other foot and looked for a pass. And I thought, wow, 3 months ago, Cole just sticks that straight in the bottom corner of the net, and you see him running away celebrating. So maybe it'll still take a little bit of time for that, but he'll have some momentum from that. I don't think you could see it was on his mind, and the celebrations told you that. I don't think his performances haven't been amazing, but I don't think they've dropped off a cliff, certainly. And he certainly played very well in that Liverpool game up to the goal. He really deserved that goal. But yes, the short answer is yes, you would think that will come at a very good time from now to have a strong end to the season, personally.
Well, we shall get out of the Liverpool match review. Just wanted to give you your chance to gloat for the prediction.
Not just a prediction, waking up feeling the Cole Palmer goal coming on as well. Sometimes you just wake up with a vibe, and you've got to go with that vibe.
I put the tweet in the script. Everyone, Matt, just go and tweet at Matt and let him know how absolutely wonderful he is. If you could predict wins in the last 3 games, which
we've already done the end of the season. I'm 2 out of 2 with Everton and Liverpool. If you hadn't rescinded my Liverpool prediction, so I'm 2 out of 2 at the moment. You don't want me to go 3 out of 3 though, because I predicted a defeat at Newcastle.
I know. So here we go. This is where the rubber meets the road. But we're going to take our first ad break, and we will be right back. All right, Matt. Since we last talked, obviously Chelsea 2 wins out of 2. Yes. Forest losing ground in the race, losing to Brentford, drawing at Palace. Newcastle, you predicted a win and a draw there for them. They've obviously, those points dropped at Brighton were kind of difficult for them. And then, I mean, we're in a spot where Villa continue to be in pretty decent form.
Just about keeping themselves alive, just about.
So, I mean, you look at where everything kind of sits right now, and, the league table is kind of shaking out, it feels like, over the last little bit. You have Liverpool, who are obviously league champions, on 82 points. Arsenal maybe hitting a bit of a speed bump here at the end of the year.
if they didn't have Southampton last game, you'd be worrying about them for the top 5.
Yeah, as I was looking at that, I was like, well, no, that's not.
Yeah, exactly.
We can stop that.
It kills it. Yeah, it kills it.
If they lose to Southampton at the end of the season, their problems are extensive. Man City on 64 points, who I think the last time we talked, I've already kind of in my mind.
They play Southampton next as well, so they're on 67.
Yep, just automatic. Let's count that. Newcastle on 63 points and 21 goal diff, just like Chelsea, but they have more goals for on 66 than Chelsea do on 62. Then Forest, due to these points being dropped over the last couple of weeks, on 61 points, and then Villa on 60 points. So that's really your top 7 rounded out and the contenders, if you will, for the Champions League spots. Oh, I mean, Opta now gives Chelsea a pretty decent edge at 67 points to finish in the top 5, whereas Villa's I think projected at 65 points now. How are you looking at this?
So my big thing is I am convinced 69 points guarantees you Champions League football. Any club. Any club that gets to 69 are guaranteed, 69 or above. So, we're already saying City are on 67. They're going to get to 69. They're fine. Arsenal have got Southampton still to play. They're going to get to 69. They're fine. So it's then between the others about getting to 69. Now, obviously, that's 2 out of 3 for Chelsea. Now, Chelsea and Newcastle might be able to do it in less than 69 because of goal difference. They might be able to. But I think you've got to be aiming for 69. Otherwise, you can, slightly put yourself in a position where it could all go wrong at the very last minute. So those 2 clubs looking for both for 2 wins. And I think I did say last time that I thought that Newcastle's run was harder than people were making out last time, because a lot of people a couple of weeks ago were saying Newcastle were there and done and dusted. And I didn't see it like that. And I do think this Newcastle game against Chelsea is a big one. Because if it goes the way I predicted, then basically I think that Chelsea will go into a final day shootout with Forest, because I do expect Forest to beat Leicester and West Ham. Even with their blip, I watched them last night, and while they weren't brilliant, I was looking at them thinking, well, they're going to beat Leicester. And I actually think, they've still got enough that they're going to beat West Ham. So I expect them to go into the final day with 67 points, and then so if Chelsea get anything at Newcastle, it will be a big result. I think that Liverpool game does, a draw would be a good result at Newcastle, and would give them the chance then. So that would put them on 64. A win against United, 67. Now that might then give them the draw at Forest, even though I've just been saying 69. So it's going to be tight. 69, 100%. Villa have to win all their games. It's as simple as that. They know, there's no ifs, buts, or maybes with Villa. They have to win all their games. Forest have to win their next 2 to take it into a shootout. And that Newcastle-Chelsea game is huge.
I mean, you think about what a draw does on Sunday, or even, I think Chelsea win at Newcastle on Sunday.
No, that's Chelsea win. I'm calling it. If Chelsea win, they're there. I'm calling it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a big one. Although, I mean, look, I think you could argue that environment this time of the year with everything on the line, that's going to be an incredibly difficult environment for this team.
Look, I watched the Brighton game while I was at Stamford Bridge before I went out for the match against Liverpool, and I was watching it thinking, this is a good result for Chelsea. It has to be a good result. Newcastle dropping points has to be a good result for Chelsea. But there is just a little thing of, they know that if they win both of their home games, they are in the Champions League. Mm-hmm. They've got to go to Arsenal. I know Arsenal have been struggling, but again, because Arsenal have been struggling, Arsenal are just going to want that win. If they draw with Newcastle, or actually if they beat Newcastle, they're done. That's fine. It puts a little bit more on that Newcastle game for Arsenal. So I think Newcastle are looking at it thinking, we've got Chelsea and Everton at home. That's our chance. We win 2 home games, we are in the Champions League. St James is going to be rocking, although 12 o'clock's can be quite hard to get rocking, but I think St James's will be rocking. So it has put the Newcastle result was good for Chelsea, but it has put more on it for Newcastle than was previously on it, and therefore I think Chelsea will step into an even tougher environment at St James's Park, and they will really go for the throat. But I do look at Newcastle, which I think I said previously. I think they've lost a bit of steam. They've got Joelinton out now for what looks like the rest of the season. That's huge for them because Willock just isn't of the same quality. This is where their squad problems kick in. There's a couple in there, like Bruno had a bad game against Brighton. Even Isak, I looked at and thought, is he fully fit? Didn't quite look on the pace to me. They look like they're struggling through. Now, I would have thought St James's and the occasion will get them up to speed this weekend. But I do worry a little bit about Newcastle, I've got to be honest. And like I say, if Chelsea go there and win, I'm calling it. Chelsea have qualified for the Champions League then. There is no way on God's earth that Chelsea mess it up if they win at St James's Park.
When you knock on wood or something, you make me
Nothing.
so nervous.
I will bet my house on it.
That's bananas. You bet your house on Chelsea Football Club right now.
That would just be enormous. Look, I'm going to stick with my prediction though. I do actually think Chelsea will lose that game for all the momentum they got. I just think it's an incredibly tough game, and it's what the home games. I think Newcastle are going to treat as all or nothing. But fortunately, Liverpool victory does give Chelsea that little bit of breathing space that if they do lose to Newcastle, it's really no disaster. And if they come away with a draw, it's a good result. And if they win, wow, it's party time for me.
Yeah, I think a draw could be on the cards. I mean, I think the other thing to kind of think about here is like a draw is not the worst result for Newcastle either. In this,
no, it keeps them going. It's not the worst result. I do think though, if it's 1-1 with 10 minutes to go, Newcastle will be trying to win the game because it's their big opportunity. Yeah,
for sure. They finish obviously Chelsea, Arsenal, Everton, Forest finish Leicester, West Ham, Chelsea. Chelsea, of course, finished Newcastle, United, Forest, and your Villa finished Bournemouth, Spurs, United. So.
Bournemouth's the one. Yeah, Bournemouth's the one for us. That's Bournemouth away is a really horrible game to have at this point of the season. Bournemouth actually, sadly for Villa, have kept their own European hopes alive by beating Arsenal. So they do actually have something to play for, which is good news for Chelsea. So I was hoping Villa might go to Bournemouth with Bournemouth not being able to really do anything. That's not the case. If Villa were to win at Bournemouth, Villa will feel they then have a chance because playing Tottenham and Man United around the Europa League final would look attractive, but that's a big obstacle for Villa to overcome at the weekend.
So I have it, and I want to know your kind of final order here in terms of the top 7. I have Liverpool, City, Arsenal, Newcastle, Chelsea, Villa, Forest.
Yeah, it's so hard because of the teams playing each other. And I almost need a pen and paper and calculator, which I don't have any of those next to me to actually work out where my prediction on scores would leave it. But I feel, without like going through my scores and working out the exact points totals, that I agree with you on the top 3. I then think, because I've said that Chelsea are going to lose at Newcastle, so I'm going to have to go Newcastle. I then think Chelsea, and actually I think Forest will sneak in just above Villa, maybe even on goal difference. But I think Villa will probably finish 7th, and I agree with your top 5. I would just have Forest and Villa the other way around, probably. But like, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. We predicted the same top 5, put it that way.
But we are at the point where we're 6 points, so 2 out of the last 3 should get it done. As far as it goes.
It will get it. 69 gets it done. 69 gets it done. I've looked at it so much, and I can't really see a scenario where 69 doesn't get it done.
Obviously, something before we hit the ad break and talk a little bit about the future that you have brought up as it pertains to the end of the season schedule. The UECL final is May 28th. International duty comes right after that, 3 days after that, essentially. Club World Cup starts 6 days after the international duty. That obviously could run all the way to mid-July. Premier League starts August 16th. Champions League potentially in September, if that happens.
I want Villa to get Chelsea on the first, second, or third weekend of next season, or City, to be honest with you, because I don't see a world in which those two clubs can start the next season prepared. And we're talking well ahead of ourselves, but they can't be prepared. They just can't. They're going to have a pre-season that's about half the size of everybody else's.
Yep.
They're not going to have proper rest. We don't know what might happen with injuries through this. It's an insane schedule, absolutely crazy. I mean, you have the final on the 28th, 3 days later or whatever, off to international duty. International duty ends, and then 3 days later, they'll meet up for World, because I think the clubs are going out. They have to go out there 3 days before their first match. So Chelsea will have to be out in the States on about the 13th at the latest. Tuchel, by the way, England's games, they have a World Cup qualifier against Andorra first, and they have a Senegal match on the 10th of June, which is a friendly. It had been anticipated that Club World Cup players might not have to stay with the squad for the Senegal game. The early indications, and there are more planning meetings, so this could be subject to change, but the early indications is Tuchel wants his squad to stay together. So at the moment, they will be staying with the squad until June the 10th. I mean, it's hard to get your head around how they will cope. Obviously, if Chelsea were to exit the Club World Cup fairly early, that would actually help them in pre-season terms, but we know they don't want that to happen. I mean, planning-wise, it's really difficult. And like I say, I cannot see a world in which City and Chelsea start next season for the first couple of weeks in a particularly good place, to be quite honest with you. But, worry about that down the line. But it's a real challenge and a real headache for the club to actually plan.
Future problems for future us. But we will come back and talk a little bit about the implications of all this, and maybe a little bit of transfers, a little bit of stadium updates. So let's take our last ad break, and we will be right back. All right, Matt. I mean, obviously, we kind of talked about the scheduling implications before the break, because that is something to really think about and consider. Chelsea are on their way to the UECL final with the 4-1 away leg in the first leg. Looks likely that they'll get over the line on Thursday. At least you sure hope so. One of the things that's popped up since we last talked is Chelsea have the illustrious end of season kit sponsor out of nowhere.
That caught us all unaware. I just assumed that was done for the rest of the season. Look, it's clearly that company have obviously struck a deal and managed to negotiate with Intuit just to have a few games on the end. But fair play to them. Great timing by them, because, Liverpool match in front of the eyes of the entire world as Liverpool of champions. That's great marketing for them. And, all of Chelsea's matches now are meaningful. They're going to have a Man U match, which, even though United are terrible, again, globally, huge visually, they might have a Champions League shootout on the final day, which could end up being the most interesting game of the final day. So, and the Newcastle match will be huge international. So really clever marketing by them just to get themselves on the front of the shirt for those games. I actually think the logo looks really good, actually. I like it on the front of the shirt. It looks quite smart. I don't think it will be the long-term one at all, but it's, Chelsea get a little bit out of it, and they've done some smart marketing. So, quite good.
If Chelsea are to finish in any one of the scenarios that's on the table, front of shirt sponsor is obviously a big deal for next year. I mean, do you think that the end of season flourish will kind of help them get over the line in terms of a sponsorship?
So, yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it before, but, Chelsea have taken this calculated gamble of not accepting, I say a long-term, but a multi-year shirt sponsorship deal while they've been out of the Champions League, because they've just felt that they have the potential to earn so much more once they're in it and lock somebody into a long-term deal on Champions League money. And this is part of the reason why Champions League qualification is so big, because it's not just about what's going on the field, it's about what's going on off the pitch too. And the next 3 games will determine whether that sponsorship gamble paid off and you can justify it, because obviously they've missed out on revenue this season from it. Albeit there is talk that they might even do a front of shirt sponsor just for the Club World Cup, which would be interesting and get a little bit back. But if Chelsea qualify for the Champions League, I think they can justify what they've done, even though it's looked weird and been quite unusual. If they don't, then questions will get asked about that strategy, because clearly the gamble will not have paid off. But if they do, they'll all be sort of slapping themselves on the back, because they'll have thought a little bit out of the box, like this ownership tend to do and get a lot of criticism for generally, and they'll be able to kind of say, "We told you so."
One that they are saying "I told you so" on, despite the huge transfer fee, is Moise Caicedo, who you reported, I believe it was yesterday, that he is, going to get the Cole Palmer treatment at the end of the season, get the new contract, and also kind of rise up the wage earnings bracket. I mean, thinking about a clear player of the season, no questions about it. I mean, this was players player of the season, fans player of the season, kind of Iron Man for a very inconsistent team. What are your thoughts on him, his new contract, and kind of where he's sitting in the hierarchy of Chelsea players?
I mean, he's phenomenal. He is absolutely phenomenal. He is definitely up there in the best midfielders in the world. And I think if Chelsea do qualify for the Champions League, when he's on that stage, we're going to hear an awful lot more about him in a wider sense. Because I don't think, weirdly, I think he's a little bit underrated outside Chelsea. I think, people know he's a good player and know he's an important player, and they certainly know his price tag. I don't think he quite gets the recognition outside Chelsea he deserves. But, start playing like that in the Champions League final and you'll quickly get the recognition you deserve, very, very quickly. And I think that builds into why Chelsea over the summer will start talks over his deal. They are aware that he will, particularly in the Champions League, start to garner more attention, not because they're scared they're going to lose him, but, once you get that profile and things, players do want to be rewarded. He's seen Cole and Nicholas Jackson get rewarded last season for their impacts in their first season last season, and now he will look at it. I'm sure, and although he's a very humble guy, he's won the men's player and the players' player of the year, and he deserves to be in the very top bracket, and he deserves to be rewarded. That is, I mean, people laugh. You get a lot of replies on Instagram and X and whatever when you post a story about a Chelsea contract, and oh yeah, he's only got 100 years left on his contract. They really need to extend his contract. It's not really about that though, because they've made such a big thing about the fact that at every level of contracts, they want to make it so that players are deserving what they earn, and they will get rewarded for performance, but they won't just get guaranteed the top wage. This is all about that, even with Moises. He's on a very big wage anyway, but he's not on, in top footballer terms, an astronomical wage, and he needs rewarding for that. And what I would say, he's not the only player they will look at in the summer. They will look at sort of lesser lights as well, and look at whether other people need rewarding now, because this is their model. You come in on what some might say is a relatively low base wage for a club of Chelsea's size. You have clauses that you can trigger. So I wrote about this in the piece. So if they qualify for the Champions League, every participating player will earn about 20% more, because that triggers a Champions League participation clause. And similarly, there's a commitment that if you perform, it's felt above the level of contract you are on in terms of pay and whatnot, then you will be quickly rewarded. And you would imagine Chelsea would also do what they did with Cole and Nicholas, and just give themselves another couple of years of protection on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that does make sense as far as the top performers go. We've kind of talked about what happens and the implications of potential Champions League football. That job is not nearly done yet. There's been some stories that have come out about transfers over the last couple of weeks as well, since we last talked. Nkunku likely on his way out over the summer. you've talked about the goalkeeping situation before and like what happens with the very odd math that exists within that situation. Sancho obviously has an option to pick up or to pay and send him back. Anything on the outgoings that you're kind of hearing murmurs of at this stage, just given the place that Chelsea are in?
So, the outgoings are probably quite simple, as you said, in Nkunku. Felix, they're looking at various deals for what can happen with Felix. That may well end up having to be another loan, to be quite honest with you. Carney has done quite well at Dortmund. I think Carney, they will be looking to sell, but I actually think they want quite big money for Carney. I think they'll want over 30 million if they can. So given his injury record, we'll see what happens there, whether they can get that. But he's certainly one that they'll look to make some money on. Disasi, although I can't really see Villa now. He was left out of Villa's last squad. I feel a little bit sorry for him. He was brought on at right back in 2 games, which didn't work out for him against PSG and Man City. As people who watch Chelsea a lot, we probably could have told Unai that wasn't going to end well with him coming on at right back. He'd actually been doing very well before then, but I can't see a scenario where Villa try and sign Disasi permanently. So he will go. The really interesting one for me, which I haven't had clarity on yet, is, and we get to this stage every single summer, and you know what I'm going to say, Trevor Chalobah, who is ending this season like he ends every season as Chelsea's best defender. And then what tends to happen is Chelsea's try to sell him every single summer and end up loaning him. And then everyone has to he comes back and he beats Chelsea's best defender again. I suspect they will try and sell him because I think that's what the whole bringing him back was about. And I know that they are obviously interested in bringing in one defender. I don't think it'll be 2 defenders. So I think it'll be 1 defender rather than 2, unless there's a lot more sales than planned. But I do fear that Trev will be on the up for sale list again.
Man, I'm not surprised at all, but
no one can be surprised because it's the same thing that happens every bloody year. I mean, it's like Groundhog Day with Trev, isn't he? He becomes the best player of the second half of the season. Then they try and sell him. Then they can't, blah, blah, blah. For some reason, they won't keep hold of the guy. But yeah, I think they will hope that his transfer value has increased significantly since last time they tried to sell him.
Does his situation coincide with what they think Fafana's future at the club looks like? And
so Fafana's a really interesting one, and it's a tough one to know how this is going to end. Enzo absolutely loves Fafana. He rates him so highly, and he thinks that Chelsea are a different team with Fafana in. The club rate him talent-wise just as highly. The problem with Fafana is clearly availability. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't see why a club would come and offer big money for Fafana with his availability problems. But I do think that were there to be, I'm plucking out the air here. Please don't I haven't heard this is going to happen. The only scenario I can really see is if a Saudi club comes and tries their luck with Fafana and offers a big fee. Maybe even PSG because the French team, but I struggle to see that. But if something comes out the blue for Fafana that's a big enough bid, I think Chelsea would have to consider it because of his availability. I just don't see why a club would take that risk. And also, I don't see them trying to push him, or I don't see them sort of drop him because the head coach, who they're very committed to, absolutely adores him. And I know that they obviously rate him incredibly highly, but there is a real concern around the club about his ongoing availability and, quite frankly, whether this is him, we're not magically going to suddenly get a Fafana that plays 30, 40, 50 games a season. This is him. He plays 15, 20 games a season, absolute top.
Yeah, I suppose the scenario that you would probably think about is if Chelsea do not finish in the Champions League, you probably are more available to offers than you are if they do finish in the Champions League. If they do,
probably, although
the calculus a little bit.
It does, but I think whether they're in the Champions League or not, I think if someone came along with a £50 million bid for him, they're going to have to seriously look at it because the guy's never fit.
Yeah.
Now, it might be that Enzo puts his foot down and say, I do not under any circumstance want this player sold. I don't know whether that would make a difference. But depending on the level of the bid, like I say, if it's a big enough bid, I don't think the Champions League thing qualification will particularly influence it. I think it'll be more about weighing up the bid against his availability and the fears around him. But Enzo does absolutely adore him. He's literally in his top 3 favourite Chelsea players. I know that for a fact.
Oh, okay. Anything with the midfield? I think there's a huge sense that Andre Santos is going to come back from Strasbourg and play a key role next season. You have Asugo coming in from Portugal. Is there any movement in the midfield that you could see happening?
Well, Dewsbury Hall for sure.
Yeah.
Outgoing. The club are adamant that they don't want to entertain any offers for Enzo Fernandez, who keeps getting linked to Real Madrid. I don't really see how Real Madrid would finance that, quite frankly, to seriously go for him. I think mainly it's going to be a shakedown of who comes back and who comes in, who's already signed, as you say, Asugo, and is part of that first team squad, and who goes out on loan. It's Amadou, isn't it? The guy who turned up in January. I'm pretty sure he will go out on loan.
Yeah.
I think the starting plan is for Asugu to take Amadou's place in the squad rather than going out on loan, and for Santos also to come back and have a real shot at making an impact. But it will be a little bit a case of see how that shakes down through the summer and numbers and whatnot. And also they have got. I'll try and be quick about this because it's complicated, but they do have a potential issue with Strasbourg and loaning, because I think if they both finish in the same European competition, basically to avoid one of them having to drop out of that European competition, part of the ownership is going to have to be paused, i.e. the Blue Co ownership of Strasbourg would have to be paused, and you also can't transfer players between clubs, either on loan or permanently. That's why Todibo didn't end up going to Man United last season. And it would stop Chelsea's obviously loaning of players to Strasbourg in the meantime. So it wouldn't stop their plans as such, because I'm sure they could find alternative loans, but it would stop probably what they've got in their head as very convenient things that they've got lined up.
The easiest pathway, right, for them.
Yeah, exactly. And they've chosen pathway because, Leroy Rossini plays a very similar style, and, they can keep a very close eye on these guys, and they can dictate exactly how they're looked after and stuff.
Yeah, well, we have plenty of time to talk about transfers. Those were just like the ones that hit the top. Interesting note on the stadium, because Hans-Jörg Wyss was quoted outside of Stamford Bridge on Sunday that Earl's Court may be the best option they could ever dream of. Sadiq Khan recently came out with a statement saying, my message to Chelsea is come and speak to us in relation to what you want to do. They're victims of their own success, and Stamford Bridge is not too small for them after this. This is a team that has twice won the Champions League. We work closely with all 7 of our Premier League clubs, but I'm sure Chelsea will look with some envy at stadiums some of the rivals in London have. We're really keen to make sure that Chelsea, as with all of our clubs, continue to flourish and thrive. So we're open to talking to Chelsea about what plans they have. At the moment, they've not approached us, but we are here. The mayor and one of the owners of the club both talking about stadium plans. I mean, obviously there's a lot. We've talked about the ownership struggles and the vision and all that sort of stuff before. We don't need to tread that territory again, but anything that you want to quickly add on the stadium piece?
So Hansi, as he was known to the interview, which
what is
I
that
loved
about? That was crazy.
I loved it. I like it when Hansi does talk, because Hansi's 89 years old and he's the unfiltered member of the ownership group. Yeah, he's going to say exactly what he thinks. He's got zero media training in him. Doesn't give a shit how it then gets played around the world. Doesn't give a shit about whether it's on social media or not. So it's always fun when I'm always going to call him Hansi now, by the way, when Hansi talks. So I love it, and he was very honest. I mean, he's pretty much told us that the Bowley side of the ownership group do want to move to Earl's Court. He's the first guy to come out and say that. I think, after Bowley's last interview when he sort of heavily hinted that way. We probably all thought it, but Hansi's put it out there on the record now. So there we go. Tick that one off. We know that the Bowley side want to move to Earls Court. What I did find really interesting about it is he very much played into the disconnect between the ownership, because he pretty much said that there's not been a directors meeting on it. He said that our path needs to be directors meetings. And the heavy implication was we're not having board meetings on this, which is astonishing on one hand and not astonishing on the other, because it would only feed into what we all sort of know and think about the disconnect and the lack of alignment between the ownership group on this. But he's put it out there. He's pretty much said we're not holding meetings on this, and we don't have one person driving it.
Well, he also kind of put, I think, Gannon and co on blast, saying there's no real leader for this project. And
yeah,
that was surprising to me as well, because I think we've had conversations about.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they would argue that Gannon is the leader on the project. More I took from it is that they're not having any meetings because there's no agreement, and therefore nobody can drive the project.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the fact that Chelsea are in such a good place result-wise at the moment, everyone's feeling quite optimistic. This interview, I think, would have played very differently at a different time of the season. I think it would have caused a lot of uproar and a lot of anger about exactly what's going on in the background. I mean, laughing about Hansi and everything, but it's probably quite an alarming interview in a way, because to me it just absolutely says nothing's happening. We're not talking about it because no one can basically agree. Because no one's talking about it, no one's really leading it, nothing's happening. I mean, I've got to say the Twickenham stories, the RFU who briefed the Twickenham stories, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, nobody had even gone to the council to check with the council. Nobody had even checked whether Chelsea had held talks with the RFU. They haven't. I mean, it was just like, it was a unicorn of a story. No substance to it whatsoever. And I've got to say, the Sadiq Khan quotes, I mean, come on, Sadiq. Everybody knows that you and Chelsea have been talking for quite a while about a variety of subjects. Chelsea put lots of images on their website and social media of you at various community events with Chelsea. And do you seriously expect us to believe that nothing's been spoken about the stadium or stadium sites? I mean, come on. We're not all born yesterday. You might think all your constituents are idiots. And as a person who lives in London and would prefer you to be focusing on other things as London mayor, but come on, we're not all idiots, and we know that conversations have been going on. So that was crackers from Sadiq. The stadium issue, it's a real annoyance of mine that Chelsea have allowed this void of information and void of communication to happen, because now all that fills that void is shit, basically. You can pour shit into that void. Excuse my language. I don't know how else to explain myself. And all you can do is just pour it in because people will lap it up because there's no proper information and no proper communication and no proper adult way of sitting down and telling us this is what we want to do and this is what is happening. It's 3 years now that this massive void has opened up. So anyone can come and say anything, and it gets massive headlines, it gets people talking, and it gets people excited that something's about to happen. Nothing's happening. Hansi's told us nothing's happening. They want different things. They're not talking about it. Hansi's told us. So cheers, Hansi.
Yeah, cheers. That's why we're gonna end the show. Cheers, Hansi. That's the only way to do this.
That's the tag for the show. Surely that's the name of the show. Cheers, Hansi.
Well, if you want to come on to the London's Blue podcast and have an extensive discussion about the planning permissions, that would be wonderful. But
I've tried so many times to get an interview with Hansi, and unfortunately I never get directly to him because the people in between him realise that it's probably a very bad idea and block it very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, look, one domino needs to fall here. Maybe that's the one. But look, Matt, appreciate obviously the time. This comes out on the Wednesday. We recorded this on Tuesday. So as always, if something happens between now and then, that's just showbiz, folks. So we will be back, obviously, with a preview for Newcastle. We have the upcoming match against Djurgården, second leg as well. So lots coming up. But until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.